Hi, I'm James Hamilton. I'm the development manager from Open Knowledge Foundation and also the director of the Net Zero Challenge project. 2 weeks ago, we ran the Net Zero Challenge event, which saw 5 teams from around the world compete in a pitch contest to answer the question, how can you use open data to advance climate action? The pitches were judged by a panel of experts, and today I'm really pleased to be talking with the winning team from France, whose project, CarbonGeoScales, is a framework for standardizing open data for greenhouse gas emissions at multiple geographic scales. So, hi guys, can I first ask you to congratulations on winning the Net Zero Challenge. It would be great if you introduced yourselves, tell me your name, where you come from, and what's your background.
So I am Saif Shabu. I'm contributing with the CarbonGeoScales. I started working in this project 6 months ago, and I am a data scientist and live in Paris.
So my name is Rafael. I'm a data engineer. I'm 27 years old, and I've been working with Saif for a couple of years.
My name is Benjamin. I'm a data scientist / analyst.
I'm Jan. I'm a researcher in astrophysics and also data analyst.
So let's talk a little bit about the project. So can you tell me about the history of the project? How did it start? Why did you start it? Tell me about the journey that your project's taken before you applied to the Net Zero Challenge.
Actually, I started working in this project as a personal project 6 months ago, and I participated in a competition organized by the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's a data science competition, and I have won the first prize in that competition, and I discovered carbon emissions data, and I discovered that there is rich data to identify, to measure emissions at different geographical scales. But I discovered too that it's a messy data. So we have to normalize it. It's complicated to combine it with other information to characterize cities and countries and their exposure and vulnerability to climate change impacts. And said, okay, it would be interesting to develop a standardized access point to multi-scale greenhouse gas emissions data, and to provide that as an open source framework with the collaborative work. So then I discussed with Raphael, how we can build the first prototype. And we heard about the Data for Good program. And we said, okay, let's try to participate with CarbonGeoScales to Data for Good program, who connect volunteers, data specialist volunteers, with project with social and environmental benefits. And thanks to Data for Good program, we get some volunteers. We grow the community. Now we have 20 contributors to our open source project.
So as I said, I'm like a volunteer in Data for Good, and I've been here for now, let's say a couple of months. So it's the second season I'm participating in Data for Good. And so every season there's different projects that are presented. And this season, CarbonGeoScale was one of them.
We've always been interested, Saif and I, into the geolocalized data, which has a lot of impact and which can be useful for many different analyses. Saif and I have always been working with geolocalized data, which can help us to analyze data in different ways that not normally done. And we've always been talking about different projects. And a couple of months ago, we talked about this one, and I was really interested. Saif asked me questions about the technical issues, like how could we do that? Is there some simple way? How could we make it scale? How could we make people contribute to the project? How could we build it? And that's where I first started getting into the project. Yeah.
So I'm part of the core team of Data for Good. So I first heard about the project when Saif applied to our season, our 9th season of supporting projects. We were very surprised by the quality of their work and also by their goal. It's really something that's core to us to be able to use open data, especially environmental data, and make it more accessible to everyone, and especially people that know to use this data. And I was involved very early on the selection of this project and presenting it to the volunteers, so framing it so that everyone could see how interesting this project was, and also like convincing volunteers to come and join the project, which we really believe in.
What is the problem that you're trying to solve?
In order to help policymaking, we need to look at different territorial scales and to mix information from different territorial scales. So in order to adapt policymaking and climate policymaking, we need to provide relevant and easy access to open data about greenhouse gas emissions at different scales. So for us, the problem is that we have data, we have a lot of open data, interesting open data, rich open data, but the access to this data, it's complicated because we have different formats, we have different spatial and temporal coverage, different access type to this data, and different updates. And sometimes you have some aggregated data on carbon emissions, but we don't have access to the treatment applied to this in order to generate this data. So this is the problem. So for us, we want to provide an easy access to standardized open data about carbon emissions at different scales. And in addition to that, providing an open source framework, so we can provide all the source code developed in order to provide this data. And to make, this is the most important for us, to build a community of data specialists working together from different parts of the world in different scales in order to integrate data related to their cities, to their territories, and to use also our data in order to integrate them in their data platform.
The open data for gas emission is like really useful, and so many people start to use it, and they all face the same issue. They are trying themselves to combine and find all the data they need to do the work. The thing is, many people and organizations are doing the same work, and we just want to be one actor to do the work for them and to centralize everything so that people who would like to use the data don't spend too much time on trying to find them and trying to aggregate them and directly take advantage of the data straight away.
The idea is to make the project work in different places. So we are using data from different territories. So we are using data from French quarters, and we are using data from World Resources Institute, from the Global Carbon Project, from the EDGAR database, from the European Statistical Database. So we are not focusing on only on French context. So, but since we are from France, so it's easier for us to identify the data providers in France and to contact them and to understand more the nomenclatures and the information about their data, the different data catalogs, because information are in French. But our goal is to extend the coverage of our project and to make people. This is why it's contribute. This is why it's collaborative project. We ask people to contribute from different cities to integrate data in their places because they have more knowledge about the data providers in their places, and we can easier translate their data and integrate it in our database.
Can you tell me, maybe Ben or Jan, can you tell me what stage is the project at now?
We have just started the season of the project, so it's been like a couple of weeks. And as I've said, we are like around 15, 20 like volunteers just like me. We're working on that. So at the moment, like we have a lot of exploration because as was said by Saif before, we have a lot of data. And so we use like, let's say, the manpower of everyone to explore the data, look at them, understand them, and understand the problematics, because since we are all volunteers coming from different fields, we also need to learn a little bit about the problematics. So it's important. So we're like in this stage of the project from the volunteer perspective, of course. And then we're just building more and more like the database and try to put them together. And so basically the idea is like in 2-3 months from the Data for Good project, we should be able to have like a first prototype that like could be demonstrated in front of people, and so that's what we're working on. But now we are like really starting the project. Like,
so Data for Good, we are a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits and projects with a social and environmental impact to solve their data problems. And every 6 months, we organize a 3-month program where we match projects with volunteers with data skills. And the goal of those projects are really to come up within those few weeks with an MVP.
You guys, you won the Net Zero Challenge competition, which has a prize of $1,000 US, which I think is about 800 euro. So how do you guys plan on spending that money?
For us, the answer is very clear, because we are using cloud data platforms in order to host our database and the application that we are developing. So now we are paying for the hosting. So this money will go for data infrastructure costs. And by the way, we are using cloud data platforms, and it will be interesting and helpful, very helpful for us to have some credits, some help from cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud Platform, to have some credits in order to host our open data and to provide access to people to this open data with good infrastructure and good performance.
Well, hopefully they'll see this video. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience of the Net Zero Challenge? You won the contest, which is great news for your project. Have there been any other benefits from taking part?
Since we participated in the Net Zero Challenge, we have been contacted by two structures. Like, we have been contacted by the Global Carbon Project and the Climate Research Institute in Oslo. And they heard about the project and they want to work with us, and they gave us their data in order to integrate it in our platform. So it's very helpful for us. And the second one is we have been contacted by a person, an associate in the World Resource Institute, and he wants to collaborate with their climate data tool and climate watch tools that they are building. And we have a discussion with him the next week in order to show what we have done and maybe collaborate with them in their climate data tools.
Yeah, I think it's great to have an objective, like when you have like a competition, and it always brings a lot of motivation. I think one thing we should also mention is the 3-minute speech exercise, which is quite a tough challenge, but it's a super interesting exercise in the way that you have to be able to sum up your project in 3 minutes. And by doing that, you really have to go to the key points. And I think it's a really great exercise, and it also a lot of benefits for us.
What's next for CarbonGeoScales? What are your plans for the project? Where do you hope to be in 12 months' time?
So now we have our first goal is to deliver a prototype as part of the Data for Good program. So until June, we have to deliver the first prototype. And then we will integrate. We have 3 months after to integrate new data sets. Now we are focusing only on bottom-up data on greenhouse gas emissions based on inventories. And in the next 3 months, after June, we will focus on top-down data like remote sensing data and sensors data about carbon concentration measurements. And so in the next 3 months after June, we'll integrate other data. And then this is the roadmap for the 6 months. After the 6 months, we will focus more on the performance of our data storage, of our API, and our data providing, and grow the community and create a more stable open source framework.
We are planning to open the APIs for public access, but in the future, the key would be to also open the API for injecting the data so that everyone could inject and get the data, so that the framework would basically grow itself in the way that people would contribute injecting the data and using the data. So it would, in a way, self-grow, which would be great. One idea we've had with SAIF since the start is that how could we combine the data we have to fill the gaps maybe for countries that we don't have, or for if we're missing some values on the grid, how can we combine the different data sources to find one value for one geo country or city or even a point on the map. So the idea is once we gather all the different data and we normalize them in the same format, it's way easier to combine them and to try to approach some different scientific techniques, maybe to interpolate some data. That's also one of our goals in the future. But for now, the key is just to inject as more data as we can, expose it, and then see how it goes.
And we need other people, more specialists in carbon emissions data, and more scientists working on these issues to work with us and collaborate in interpolation of missing data, or what we call downscaling, statistical downscaling. Once we have a different data at different scales, we can predict and we can forecast some information based on different information on other scales. And this is some statistical technique, and there are some specialists on this issue, and we want to provide them with easy access to data to do that, and maybe work with them for the downscaling greenhouse gas emissions data. In order to understand the emissions, we need to face with them some other information about socioeconomics, like the population, the GDP, in order to understand how the emissions are connected and related to GDP, or information about the cities and the countries. So the second part will be integrating other data sets, other information that characterize the different geospatial scales in terms of socioeconomics, and even in terms of other information, geophysical information, in order to be in order to make easy the combination between emissions information and other information.
How can people contribute to your project?
Our first goal now is to grow the community. So to contribute, it's very easy. We have different ways that we identify in different ways to contribute. We need people who can help us to identify open data related to carbon emissions at their territorial scales, and integrate their information on our GitHub page. We have a GitHub repository for only data description, open data description related to carbon emissions. We need also people working in data, like data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, to help us for analyzing this data, and provide their notebooks in our GitHub. So everything is in the GitHub, and we have a repository related only to data exploration. And we need people, the third category, we need people working for the development of our API, or people who have knowledge in data infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, or data architecture. So they will help us for the development of the API, improving the performance of the API, and the data storage issues, and how we can manage the repositories in our data lake, and how we can manage the cloud processing costs. So don't hesitate, go to our GitHub page and see what we have done, and give us some advice, and contribute with some push and comments.